Hello, I'm Captain Ulysses S. Grant, late of the United States Army. And if I might, I should like to think out loud a bit with you and reflect upon an event that was significant in my life, my journey home to Whitehaven, Missouri, near St. Louis, after my resignation from the United States Army at Fort Humboldt, California in 1854. It was arduous and difficult. I had resigned on April 11th of 54 to take effect on July 31st of 54. However, I was able to wrap up my paperwork, close my accounts in my books, and leave Fort Humboldt on the way home on May the 7th. I left on a vessel called, oddly enough, the Arispe, A-R-I-S-P-E. I was never able to find out if that was a person, place, or thing, but no matter. It was loaded with timber and gold dust, and I was going home. When I got to San Francisco, I went to see a friend of mine, former Army officer friend, Captain Thomas Harris. Tom Harris had left the Army and gone into banking, and I had loaned him some money to help him get started at 2% interest, $1,750, a princely sum. And he gave me 2% interest, and I was told I should be wary of that. That's a warning signal, but I trusted Tom Harris, and he needed the money, I thought, to get a business going, a bank going, and I loaned it to him. Now, leaving California, probably never to come back, I needed my money. I went to see him, and I must say he was greatly surprised to see me, and that greatly surprised me. He hemmed and hawed a bit, but he said, "I don't have that much cash. Can you give me a couple of weeks to get it?" And I said, Certainly, I'll give it to you. Give that time. So I took advantage of the 2 weeks to go visit with my brother-in-law, Lewis Dent. Lewis came out here a while back in the gold rush and had gone into being a ferry operator, a trading post operator, had a store, and he was at Knight's Ferry on the Stanislaus River, about 120 miles southeast of San Francisco. I went there, visited with him, fished, and had a good time for a couple of weeks. When I went back to San Francisco, I found to my great disappointment that Tom Harris was nowhere to be found, and neither was my money. So now I am in a difficult place. I was able to get a room in a boarding house, a flop house, called, oddly enough, a poor parody of humor, the What Cheer House. And I don't know if it was a play on the words, the slang, what cheer, like what's here, or what cheer, like happiness. Well, I will tell you, there was no cheer in the What Cheer House. I had an upper floor garret. It's all unpainted lumber. And I had a small room with only a cot, a table, and a chair. And in the few days I was there, a friend of mine, a good friend indeed, Robert Allen, who was the quartermaster for the Army for the Pacific Division, the California Division, and we were good friends, having both been quartermasters, I at Fort Vancouver and him over the military district. And Robert Allen knew me. Well, he came looking for me, and he found me sitting in that room alone. And he was aghast, and he said, "Grant, what are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm doing nothing." And I told him what all had transpired. And he said, "I can get you home. First, there is a voucher that I can get you for $40 per diem pay for having served on a court-martial a while back. The other issue is the Pacific Mail Steamship Company does a great deal of business with us, the Army, and they occasionally will provide free travel for Army officers or dependents, their families, and I can get you passage home, and we can get you back to New York with a few dollars. Come to my office tomorrow afternoon. I was thrilled. The next afternoon, I went in. Now, when I came in, I spied what looked like a very comfortable lounge chair and took note of that. And Robert Allen was not there, but Richard Ogden, his assistant, was. And he was expecting me. I had the voucher paper, and he looked at it, and he said, "Well, Captain, this is not properly filled out. I can't give you any money on it." I was apparently so crestfallen that he said, wait, I'll give you the $40 and put the paperwork through. If it comes back as improperly done, I will redo it until it is properly done. Or if I have to, I'll just forfeit the money and give it to you out of my own pocket. I was very pleased. And I said, "May I sleep on that lounge chair tonight?" And he looked back at me, and he said, "Yes, but why?" And I said, "I don't have any money." And he asked me, "Do you have any money to eat?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he gave me $1, and he said, "Look, Captain, take this. You can eat dinner and breakfast on this, and then we'll go to the steamship company." And I was thrilled with that $1. And I said, "This is wonderful, but I still need to sleep in that chair tonight." And he agreed, and I did. The next day, we went to the Pacific Mail Steamship Lines, and they gave me a room passage back to New York City. In fact, they gave me a stateroom at no charge. I couldn't have been happier, because that was beyond my wildest dreams of a stateroom. And I had my $40, and that meant that by the time I got back to New York City with my expenses along the way, I would still have $15 when I got there, which was a respectable amount of money. And I left on June the 1st and sailed to Nicaragua. I got to Nicaragua on June the 15th, went across Lake Nicaragua to the Atlantic side. While in Nicaragua, I got news of two issues. One was, we found out through the news, the papers, that Congress had passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act just a few days before. That concerned me because it was an issue of great contention. It was going to allow the citizens of the states of Kansas and Nebraska to vote whether they wanted to be slave or free. Now, that was going to, I felt, provoke bloodshed, because the slavery issue is so volatile. Also, it does away with the Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise, 1850. It does away with that previous legislation and throws it open to popular sovereignty, the popular vote. I was glad that I had held on until I got that rank of captain, because I thought this may be a problem for all of us later. Also, while I was in Nicaragua, or crossing Nicaragua, I got notification that I had gotten, or was to get, $500 from Fort Humboldt. And I wrote a letter to Tom Harris back in San Francisco and said I was having it forwarded to him, to his bank. I still trusted Thomas Harris. So then I was on the Atlantic side of Nicaragua and sailed home to New York City. And I got to New York City on June the 25th. When I got there, I sent Elijah Camp, who was now a storekeeper, quartermaster at Sackett's Harbor again. I had met him at Sackett's Harbor back in 51 and 52. He had gone there after he left San Francisco. Now, he had approached me when I was at Fort Vancouver with a good idea, I thought, about setting up in a general store in San Francisco. And I was enamored of the idea, and I loaned him $1,500. After a while, and he began making money hand over fist. But after a while, he came to me and he said that he really would feel better if he was running the business alone, and he wanted to buy me out. I didn't want to do that, but I agreed with him. And he was so persistent. And he paid me back $700, but there was still $800 that he owed me. Since Elijah Camp sold all manner of articles, including firearms, he had gunpowder in the store. Well, someone got careless and some of the gunpowder exploded and blew the store to smithereens. Camp was not hurt, so far as I know, but at that point, he decided not to reopen. He was going back to Sackett's Harbor. He was done with California. He had recouped his original $2,000 investment, plus he had $6,000 more. So Elijah Camp had $8,000 in cash. I wanted $800 of it, and he refused to give it to me. I think the man's deranged. He said some things to me in conversations about his family and his background. I think they're all deranged. But he absconded with my money. But now, from a friend who lives in Sackett's Harbor, who's written me a letter saying Elijah Camp is back, I'm in New York City on June the 25th, and I wrote him a letter. I'm coming for my $800. I took a train to Watertown, rented a horse, and rode to Sackett's Harbor. And when I got there, I found Elijah Camp had decamped. I've been chided about it, but I expect writing him a letter telling him I'm coming was not the best decision I could have made to assure my getting my money. But he wasn't there. So now I've got to retrace my steps back to New York City and took almost everything I had. I had taken a room at the Astor House. Well, at this time, they've seized my luggage and my clothing and are trying to put me out. Once again, I'm in desperate straits, but I found out that an old classmate of mine from West Point, Simon Bolivar Buckner of Kentucky, was in town on commissary duty. I went to pay him a visit and ask him for a loan. Buckner did not loan me any money. He said, I know the proprietor of the Astor House. Come with me, we'll go talk to him. And he assured the proprietor that I was good for my money, and he would get his money. And with that assurance, that vouching for me from Buckner, a friend of his, he released my luggage and my clothing. Then Buckner turns to me, and in our talking, he said, you're going to have to telegraph your father and ask him to send you the money to get to Covington, Kentucky. And I said, I really do not want to do that. And he said, you have no choice. You're going to have to ask your father for that money. So I agreed. I telegraphed my father, Jesse Grant, and asked him for a loan and some money. He telegraphed back, wired the money back to me. I paid the Astor House owner, paid the other loans and debts that I had accumulated while I was in New York City trying to get the money from camp, and left New York. So into August, I arrived at Covington, Kentucky, the home of my parents. They've moved across the river from Georgetown, Ohio, where I was born, to Bethel, Ohio, to Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati. And it was, the visit was what I would have to say a bit stiff. My mother, who is not exactly demonstrative in her emotions, said that she was glad that I was shut of the Army and out of it, and that I should have never been in the Army to start with. My father, who's always told everybody, all his friends, I was going to amount to something someday and bragged on me, now is facing me at 32 years of age and broke with a wife and 2 children and no visible means of support. And he, at every opportunity that week that I was there, said, well, the Army, West Point and the Army has ruined one of my boys for business. That was embarrassing and very painful. And all I could say was, yes, I expect it has. I stayed a week. I asked him for a loan of $500 payable at 10% interest. He did not give it to me. So then, well into August, I made my way back to St. Louis and Whitehaven. And the reunion was nothing less than joyous. Fred didn't recognize me after having been gone. Buck, Ulysses Jr., had never seen me, but I swept both of them up into my arms, hugging them and kissing them. Julia came running out the door dressed in a nice dress because she was expecting me any day and always put on a nice dress for me to see her for the first time. And we all were hugging and kissing and crying and laughing, and it felt wonderful to be home. There are other things I should like to think about with you. My farming efforts at Whitehaven, building of hardscrabble, the difficulties I had with being a farmer, moving into St. Louis, becoming a businessman in real estate, trying to become the county engineer of St. Louis County, and other things about which I should like very much to look back and reflect with you, if you should care to hear them. But for the moment, I have talked quite enough, and I will bid you adieu. So I'm Captain Ulysses S. Grant saying goodbye.